Welcome, welcome, everybody. We are so excited to have you here today. People are trickling in right now, but as we go, I would love to see you hop in the chat and go ahead and share where you are joining from. Kind of get a little feel for our audience today. So I am in the Dallas, Texas area, and we have, let's see what else we have. Salt Lake City, Utah. So feel free to jump in. We've got Florida. Julian is here from Florida. Fantastic. Okay. Well, I wanted to get us started. Oh, Madrid, Spain. Love it. I bet it is beautiful there. So jealous. So my name is Lori Boyer. I am our host for today. You are in for a real treat, so be excited. I wanted you to practice getting in the chat here today because this is going to be an interactive session. So as we go, if you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat and we will be happy to answer. I have today two amazing guests. So I'm going to get to them in a moment, but first we have to go through the regular housekeeping items, as we all know. So today, just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and you're going to get an email usually within about 24 hours, a link to watch it. It's going to be on demand. So if you want to rewatch it, if you want to share it with some of your staff, just know that that recording is coming. You're welcome to take feverish notes, but you don't have to if you don't want to. If you want to just sit back and drink a coffee and chill, that's great. Again, we want you to be part of this. These sessions are so much more effective when we talk with one another and learn from each other as well as from our experts. So you can use the Q&A widget if you have specific questions that you want us to answer in the Q&A at the end, or you can go ahead and use the chat box and we can talk with one another as we go. Again, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. If we have tons and tons and don't have time, we'll make sure we get with you after. So feel free to leave in any questions. And finally, we always want to know what you think, what topics you're interested in, how you felt the webinar went. So there's going to be a short little survey at the end, pops up. We love your feedback. So just sit back and get excited because today is going to be a really fun day. As I mentioned, I'm Lori Boyer. I'm a Senior Marketing Communications Manager at Easypost. And I am hosting today this co-webinar put on by Easypost and ShipHawk, talking about flexibility and kind of the best way for you to get ahead in logistics in the industry today. For that purpose, we have two incredible guests. We are really privileged here to have Jeremy Bodenhamer. He is the CEO at ShipHawk. Say hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Lori.
And John Wharff. He is over our solutions engineers at Easypost. He's our local tech nerd. So tech questions. John's your guy. John, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
Perfect. So the way this is going to run today, and hi, Carlos from Texas. I am in Texas as well. So my fellow Texan. The way this is going to run today is I am just going to shoot questions at these guys. So like I said, if you have questions, throw them in as well. We're going to run over kind of some of the biggest challenges and issues going on in the industry today. Hear from these experts around what they think is happening and, you know, see what questions you have as well. Before we even do that, though, Jeremy and John, will you each take a second, kind of introduce who you are and tell us, you know, who ShipHawk and who Easypost are. Jeremy, let's start with you.
All right. Yeah, my name's Jeremy Bodenhamer. I'm founder and CEO at ShipHawk. I'm based out of Santa Barbara, California. And our products, we make shipping software, a TMS. We have a warehouse management system. We also have a host of other products that work along with those two main products. But really, we make the software that runs owner-operated distribution centers. Roughly 60% of the market is, you know, brands that operate and run their own DCs, and we make the software that make that happen.
Fantastic. John?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm John Wharff. Like Lori mentioned, I have run several of our internal technical teams here at Easypost, been here just shy of 6 years. And it's basically been my job throughout to know how the sausage is made, understand all of our different product lines, understand exactly how they can benefit customers, how they can drive down costs, increase revenue, and everything else like that. Easypost is more honed in on exclusively the shipping aspect of the logistics journey. I think that what Jeremy and the ShipHawk folks do is one of the most fascinating, interesting things. If any of you have never been to a warehouse, it is like a whole new world. And once you can wrap your head around all of the complexity and all of the challenges that can arise, it's really, really interesting. And then we partner in order to get you labels, to talk to carriers, to make sure that we handle all of the legs of your journey from any distribution center, ship from store, all the way to your consumer, to your end customer, whoever that may be.
That is perfect introduction to our first section. So today we're going to touch on kind of three main areas that have had huge impact on the industry. That's consumer expectations, and specifically how they're constantly changing. Okay. We're going to talk about technology. That is huge. You can't go anywhere without talking technology. And we're also going to talk about partnerships. Relationships are a big deal in this industry, more than in many other industries. And so we're going to talk about how you guys can take advantage of partnerships with people and how you develop those kind of relationships. So I'm going to dive in and I'm going to talk consumer expectations just to start. Okay. And John, I'm going to throw this to you first. How do you feel like consumer expectations have changed over the last decade? And maybe they've gone one way and come back, but how do you feel like they've changed? And then Jeremy, I'm going to have you answer, how have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I think there's a really easy, obvious answer, which is consumers now want everything quickly and they want it for free. I think that we've entered this new world, but I also think that there's a lot of subtlety to exactly what consumers are expecting, at least as far as their relationship goes with buying and receiving products. I think that what we've seen time and time again, and what all the studies kind of bear out, is people just want transparent honesty about how long products are going to take to get to them, how much it's going to cost them if they have to pay for shipping. We've seen a lot of people kind of adopt the dual method of free slow shipping and maybe a pricier expedited offering, stuff like that. And I think that we're just going to continue to see that. People were already kind of biting on the e-commerce nugget even before we had, those few years of a crazy pandemic. And that just led more and more companies to really adopt this model of being able to get things out of distribution centers, of being able to ship from store, of being able to serve people where they live. And I don't think that will ever go away. I think that the new world is trying to facilitate this idea of getting people stuff quickly and making sure that we can keep costs down. Obviously, we have to think about it from both areas on our side of the fence, which is how do we keep costs down, not only for the customer, but for the shipper and for the people who are warehousing, for the people who own these products and have to get them out the door. And I think that that's the interesting thing that we're all trying to tackle at the same time, is processing orders quickly, getting them out the door quickly, making sure that we're picking the right service levels through a vast carrier network that will save us the most money and get things there on time.
So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you first, do you agree with John? Is that what you're seeing as well? Second, if that is true, like, how do we manage to do that without even breaking the bank? That seems like, they want it fast and they want it quick and they want it perfectly done. And yeah, just what suggestions do you have?
Yeah, so I agree with what John said. I think there's a nuance to the transparency and honesty, right? Yeah, they want it transparent. I actually don't think that the buyers want honesty. They want accuracy.
Okay,
I think they
wow,
want us to a certain degree to be able to see the future, right?
Okay, wait.
Chances
So
are
they don't want honesty, they want accuracy. What are you saying? What is the difference?
Yeah, so the chances are the vast majority of people on this call are in charge of some sort of operation for a brand, right? And so they have customers or prospects that they are trying to satisfy. And what we as buyers, when we put ourselves in those shoes, want is we want to know for sure when something's going to be on our doorstep. We don't want to think about the fact that trucks break down. We don't want to think about the fact that people don't show up for shifts, right? We don't want to think about the fact that yeah, I'm doing my best to upgrade all these software products for this operation I took over, or these products that have lasted me this long but no longer last. But there's so much work to do, and I've done a lot, right? But I'm not going to get credit for that because this one legacy product over here is still spitting out garbage, and I know it, but I'm doing the best I can, right? So the buyer's expectations, I think about it in the terms of grace, and they have no grace for the brand anymore, right? They don't care if you're little, they don't care if you're big. They
Yeah, that's true.
expect you to be Amazon without the resources, right? You don't get to have the world's largest balance sheet, and you don't get to lose money for decades while you're building an infrastructure around the planet,
Yeah.
right? But you still have to perform to the same standards,
Okay,
right?
so
So
really, really interesting, Jeremy. So what I was hearing from you is they don't want excuses. They don't want to hear your excuses on why, but they do want to know when the heck their package is going to get there, and they want it to be accurate. Is that what you would say?
that is what I would say, yes.
Is there a point where you feel like you should share, you know, what is going on? So that's really interesting because I haven't heard that much, Jeremy. That's kind of a hot take for me. A lot of people talk, oh, transparency, transparency, tell them everything that's going on in your door. But you're saying they don't necessarily want to hear that. Are there times, if there's some massive hurricane, we're having all these hurricanes, can you then say like, hey, your shipment's delayed due to Hurricane Georgina or something? Are there times you feel like people should include that kind of info?
They appreciate that 100%, and I think it's in all of our best interest to include as much information as possible,
Okay, so
right?
you're not saying to not include it.
No, but information never stopped. Before ShipHawk, I owned a little, very unsexy pack and ship store, right? And it didn't stop my customer from asking me to go drive through the neighborhood and find the FedEx truck and see if I could get his new iPad off the truck early because he had a presentation that he had to use this new iPad for, right? Like the world goes on.
Mhm.
And so I think, yes, more data is better. They want more, but more data doesn't necessarily satisfy. Your question was about how their expectations are changing, and their expectations are flawless, perfect, as long as I need it that way. Like if you're buying toothpaste and you still have some, do they care if it shows up a day late? They might not even notice if it's a week late, right?
Right.
But if it's something they need, like they don't care what the excuse is.
Mm.
I almost liken it to like a fine dining experience, right? Like you go to this nice restaurant, you sit down, everything is presented to you in a specific way, and you have expectations about the quality of the meal, the service, how everything's going to be presented to you. But anyone who's ever worked in the restauranting business knows that back of house is chaos. It's a nightmare. Things are flying around, people are screaming at each other. Like it
Mhm.
is very loosely organized chaos. But you can't express that to the front of house, right? They're expecting this calm, hey, everything is exactly the way I wanted it. It's presented in this really beautiful way. And it's about that balancing act, kind of to Jeremy's point, where it's like, yeah, you always want to be upfront and transparent about, yeah, hurricanes, it's delayed. It's going to be a couple extra days. But ultimately, I agree with Jeremy in that they don't want to know what's happening in back of house. They just want their fancy meal and their quiet dining experience. And they want to feel like they got value at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's interesting for me with consumer expectations is that they are constantly changing. So, we jumped into this free and fast and then people willing to pay, they want it now, now, now. And I just read an article this week, shout out and anyone in the chat if you read this, that USPS, I believe their expedited shipping for the last year was down 40%. And that's because of the economy, right? So obviously consumer expectations do see some shifts here. How do you recommend people stay on top of that in terms of shipping specifically? So how can they know if people are wanting it fast or if they're wanting it cheap? Jeremy, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, so there's multiple things in there. The 40% reduction in those priority mail in that priority mail shipment volume is fascinating.
Mhm.
What the people on this call have control over is the SLA, right? Service level agreement. This is the promise we're making to our customers as to how we're going to perform. And so that's how the lens we have to use to manage. And so one question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the tools to properly manage our shipments, our order volume by that SLA, right? Do I have the tools to say, hey, every day, every shift, whatever the measurement standard may be, that I'm meeting those requirements. So I had 100 orders. I said those 100 orders would be out the door today, or they'd be on some sort of 2-day service. Did that happen or not? Right. And then you can take it a step further and say, you know, within those 100 orders, I had 90 orders that were worth $10, and I had 10 that were worth 10,000. And my CFO wants to make sure we can book that revenue from that $100,000 because that's what's going to carry our business. Can I at least make sure that those got out? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What controls do I have there? Secondarily, as it relates to the services, right? Yeah, everybody's trading down, and I think there's a lot more into it than just the cost of priority mail. There's a lot of changes with the Postal Service, a lot of consolidation, new services that are and carriers that are available. But I think a lot of it more is matching and the ability to match the need to the service. So back to my toothpaste example, right? We just don't need the toothpaste if there's still some in the tube in the drawer. And so, yeah, we're going to trade that down as much as possible. And if we have software that allows us to make that trade and to be able to control for the buyer and for us as the shipper, which order has urgency and which ones don't, right? There's a lot of cost to be recouped there, a lot more margin that we can control. So that's where I think the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly, right? It's an understanding of what you're shipping, what the desire for what you're shipping is, the value of what you're shipping. There's a lot of different levers that are going to kind of change the way that you approach the specific product types that you're sending out. And I agree. On the one hand, you have toothpaste. On the other hand, you may have life-saving medications. There's a lot less wiggle room if you need to get meds out to people on time so that they can have access to medications they need or fill in the blank for whatever else. Another thing that I'm really glad that Jeremy brought up that's so important is, yeah, there's going to be different scrutiny on a $10,000 shipment than there is on a $5 shipment, right? Like if you're just buying a new lanyard, you're probably going to care less overall than if you're buying a $5,000 leather jacket from an exclusive boutique store in New York City, right? There's a different set of eyes, different desire for how much information you get, for when you get that information, and everything else. And I think that it's really understanding that, first of all, as the person providing the shipment, as the person with the product, as the person selling, really understanding your own product mix and what drives your customers, and then making sure that you have the right connections, the right partnerships, which I know I'm jumping the gun, we're going to talk about. But it's having the right people like Jeremy who have been in this space, who get it, who know the challenges. I guarantee Jeremy could walk into almost any warehouse in the world and immediately know the places to look for problems, because there are certain things that are going to affect everyone. Yeah, you may have a really unique problem that we've never seen before, but the same breakage points are possible for every single shipper on the planet.
Okay, I love, love, love how you both mentioned basically, so everyone listening, do you know what those high priority items are? What categories do you have that are deal breakers when it comes to the customer experience? You know, are they high cost things? Are they things that are vital, like John mentioned with, you know, medications, things like that? Those things need to have high oversight. And I always say that, especially as we're coming up on peak season, and you may run into some sort of blips as, you know, volume scales, and keep your eyes so closely focused on those high priority items and make sure those customer experiences are seamless. Okay, Jeremy mentioned tech, John mentioned partnership. We're going to come to those, but I have one last question around customer experience that I want to get your take on. So I've heard kind of some conflicting opinions on this, and it's on choice when it comes to shipping for your customers. You know, some people say give tons of options of shipping. Some say, well, maybe we can control it a little bit better and anticipate better if we limit how much choice we give in terms of speed and cost and all of those things. Do you two have opinions on this kind of debate? Those in the audience, you know, what are your opinions? Love to see that in the chat. John, let's start with you. Do you have an opinion on more choice, less choice? Is there a sweet spot?
I do have an opinion, and it's not going to make you happy. My opinion is...
John always has an opinion. So.
It's true. My opinion is either can work, but you have to know what you're doing. there's like this colloquial thing that I always throw around in the office, and that's as a consumer, like not thinking about my job, not thinking about what I do. When I go onto websites to buy items, there are a few things that I, with the knowledge that I have, will immediately know. And I say this all the time on the floor. If you go to a place and they're offering expedited shipping for free, one of two things are true. One, they really know their crap. They have things dialed perfectly. They have built-in margins to cover shipping costs, everything else. Or two, they're going to be out of business in a year, right? There are things that you can observe and there are things that you can understand. And I don't think that I don't think it's as easy as to say one or the other approach is better, but you better be able to defend your approach and you better be able to understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And whether that's getting customer feedback, understanding your own tech stack, understanding what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you're just doing it because you think it's the best way to do it, but you have no data to back up that decision, that's probably not going to be very sustainable long-term.
I love that. So you testing, are you actually checking to see what works? Jeremy, any other thoughts on that? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I'll take a different tack because I agree with what John said. My perspective is about the execution side of things. So don't marry yourself to any commitment that you either can't keep or makes it problematic for your business to keep. So one easy one for us all to understand is the name of the carrier, right? The color of their truck. There's absolutely no benefit to saying that I'm going to ship your order with this carrier no matter what, right? Putting that logo up there, it just doesn't help you because then post order, if anything changes, if any of your calculations were wrong and it's better for your business to redirect that elsewhere, you just lost that control or you're causing friction in your process. Someone thinks it's coming on one truck and they go to track it somewhere else. The other problem here on the timeline is, can you even execute, right? So if you say, hey, I'm going to send you overnight, I'm going to use the word overnight. Well, I'm buying that thing at 5 o'clock West Coast, right? Your DC's not here, right? It's somewhere east of me. What are the chances that's actually going to get out tonight? Even if you're running 3 shifts, is it really going to be picked up? No, it's not going out till tomorrow, which means it's really a 2-day service. And so do we even think those things? Because those people are going to end up on the phone calling you saying I bought overnight, right?
Yep.
So we want to make sure we craft the options in a way that, yes, it maximizes margin. It takes into account the margins I have on the items, minimum orders, all those things, but also that we're not tying our hands and creating problems where we don't need to, right?
That is fantastic advice. And one thing I love is twice now you've pointed out kind of the SLAs, the service level agreements. Basically, when it comes to customer expectation, one of the key things you're saying is that we need to make sure we can actually do what we're saying that we're going to do. So whatever it is, whether you're saying I'm going to ship in 82 days, none of you should do that. That it is in 82 days, right? That whatever our expectations, whatever we're promising, that is what we deliver. Is that what I'm hearing? And that seems like a standard. Now, technology.
Well, and
yeah,
like Jeremy
ahead,
said, make sure you can deliver, right? Like if you're just getting into this business and you're just shipping and you want to go head to head against the Amazons in the world, saying, hey, everything will get to you in 2 days no matter what, but you haven't really thought of how that works and what is actually happening on a warehouse floor and what your pick pack structure looks like, how are you scanning things in? How is receiving working? Are you receiving things same day or is it taking you 2 weeks to get stuff off the dock and onto the shelves and everything like that? There are so many different places where you have to take an honest look and say, what is the best approach for where I am? Sure, always keep your eye on the prize and you can improve and you can get better and everything else like that. But this is one of the reasons why I love having people like Jeremy on the call, because his world, once again, like ultimately when they come to Easypost, they're saying, okay, we're ready for a label, but we always have to have the talk about how do we upgrade, right? Because to Jeremy's point, hey, if you have a 2-day service, but it takes you a day to get it out, that's not a 2-day label anymore. Now it's a 1-day label and that's way more expensive. And how do you want to handle that and everything like that? So it's interesting where these two worlds collide, because there can be a lot of moving pieces. And if you are just guessing, stabbing in the dark, you're going to get some of it wrong. You might not get all of it wrong. Some you may knock out of the park on your first try, but there are going to be issues for sure.
Okay. I'm so glad you said that, John, because to me, it brings up the idea of our next topic, which is technology. Pretty much in today's logistical world, as you mentioned earlier, John, you go into the warehouse, I go into warehouses, and my mind is literally blown. I'm like a little kid saying, what in the world? Like how amazing this is. And the truth is 90% of, the consumers out there have no idea that that's going on. As Jeremy mentioned, they don't want to know about all that crazy stuff. But that's where technology is so, so critical and so important. So let's talk a little bit about technology. Again, if any of you have questions around technology, throw them in the chat. Somebody did ask if this is being recorded. It absolutely, if you were late, yes, it's being recorded. You will get this recording after. You are going to want to listen to what Jeremy and John have to say again. So let's talk technology. How, first of all, do you feel like technology, has it changed? I mean, technology to me has always been kind of a piece of the logistical world, even back in ancient times, right? As high tech as you got, that's in logistics. But, how has technology changed over time, specifically at ShipHawk? Jeremy, I'd love to hear, how has your technology changed? And John, maybe you can share kind of at Easypost as well.
Yeah, I mean, radical changes here. We started just as this packing and rating algorithm trying to help people price shipping in real time. When we started the company, you couldn't determine what an actual price was for anything, and everything's moving online. And so everybody was just guessing and their margins were eroding. So we started with just some basic algorithms. And now we have a full-fledged transportation management system. We have a warehouse management system. We have the e-commerce shopping cart. We have the rules engine. We have audit and reconciliation that is sold as another module to our product. I mean, it just keeps getting, the platform itself keeps expanding. And so that's what we do. And in part where the industry is going, which is it's not a consolidation, but it really is a consolidation, where the era of free capital meant that there's point solutions for everything. So I can go route over here, print labels over here, return over here. I mean, I could have 15 or 20 of these different relationships.
Your tech stack is
Yep.
big.
And then you got dependencies and you don't know, you got, when there's problems, I don't know who to call. And I mean, there's so many different challenges there. And so there's a lot of that coming into single platforms where there's more reliability and there's more accountability in the relationship because everything's happening in one place. So I can pick up the phone, I can call and find out what's really going on in the event that there are issues, or more importantly, if I need things to change, I have one partner I can trust to kind of help me evolve to keep up with things, which you're probably going to get to in a second here.
Yeah, we'll talk about partnerships for sure, because that's critical when it comes to technology. But John, I want to hear your info on tech.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be something that will never slow down once again. Kind of to Jeremy's point, there's an ever evolving list of the new hot thing on the market, what a new solution to provide some specific answer to one of your questions about logistics, right? And I like that you brought up warehouses. It's really funny. One of the conversations that we have a lot of times with our new salespeople, right, is that kind of our basics where we got started at Easypost was this idea of a multi-carrier API where, hey, don't just stick with one carrier. You're going to save way more money if you start competing them against each other, right? Find the lowest rate and everything like that. Well, we would have brand new salespeople who were talking to these big warehouses and they'd be like, oh, why don't you just turn on FedEx today and start shipping with them? And Jeremy knows that means a lot of work on a warehouse floor. You need a new conveyor line and you need new systems for scanning in boxes and you need a new spot on the dock where that truck can back up and you can fill it. And it's not as easy as flipping a switch, which in the API world, it is. Just give us your credentials, you're set up, you're ready to go. So it's a lot of understanding exactly where your customer's at, where their journey is. Are they very, very small, just getting started? Are they mid? Are they high growth on their way to enterprise? Kind of understanding their needs, what technologies are they using, and how do we have to communicate back and forth with them so that we get the full picture. One of the things that I really love about ShipHawk is they have a really, really good overall understanding of these needs in the warehouse space. And on the Easypost side, we have this really good understanding of the shipping space and what kind of data people want and how to make decisions and how to change the way that they're approaching shipping. And I think as with all of these conversations, like new tech, new advances, new solutions, whether they're software or hardware, do you want robotics? Do you want a pick pack wall? All of these things, it's not an easy yes or no. And there's a lot of different factors that are going to push you one way or the other. Things about volume, product type, number of SKUs, everything like that. And I think that the two-step process will always be understand where you're at and understand where you want to go, right? And they're not always equivalent. What do we have today? And are we doing that really well? Because one of the worst things you can do is have a really bad process and then scale that process up. You want to get your hands around what you have and then scale intelligently, make sure you're making good decisions and that you're growing the way you want to, so that you don't get an oopsie one day in the mail and realize I've eroded every bit of revenue that I possibly had. My costs are skyrocketing and I don't know how to get out of this hole anymore.
So I'm going to put both of you on the spot. You're not prepared for this question, so everyone can get with me and see how they answer. But if you had to recommend, not names, but let's say 2 or 3 types of technology that you feel like are critical. So let's say somebody out there, maybe they're just graduating, they're an SMB, they've been in their garage, they're moving on up. So, you know, what do you feel like are kind of the critical pieces that everybody maybe should be looking into? Again, I say everybody, knowing all businesses are different, so there's gonna be some nuance there. But do you have ideas of what you feel like you couldn't live without if it were you yourself doing your own small business? Anyone, either of you want to start, since I'm throwing it at you?
I mean, my perspective on that is that it's directly correlated to business stage, right?
Okay, perfect.
So like your example, if we're starting a small business in my garage, right?
Okay.
What we're going to care about is having a button for everything, because we don't have a lot of orders. So we want a lot of control. So if somebody calls, we care a lot about that order, even though we're making $4 on it. Right? We're like, I got to make it perfect for this person. Why? So we want them to come back and we want to build our business. So I need a button for that. Well, guess what? When we get a little bigger and we're out of my garage and we're into our first warehouse, which is more like just a bigger garage, right?
Yeah.
That's where buttons start getting expensive. And then you also have way more inventory. So I need to know where everything is. And now we have to hire people. So I need to keep track of that inventory, make sure it stays there unless it's leaving on an order and nowhere else, right? Not out the back door. So now I need inventory management. So I would say at your micro business stage, just shipping software that is
Okay.
built for that stage. And it usually starts with the word ship and ends with another word that's not hawk, right? that it's for that stage. There's a lot of buttons. And then you move and you're like, now it's critical that I have a warehouse management system. I have to have inventory management. And then the stage after that is where, ShipHawk's shipping software comes in. It's like, well, now that shipping's really expensive. I know where all my inventory is, but now I can't be spending money on people clicking buttons all day. So now I need some software automation, some intelligence to start answering questions. And then the step after that is the hardware, robotics, where I'm going to start adding pieces of hardware to make bits and pieces of my operation more efficient, right? And hopefully I made good choices along the way and those products are able to scale. If not, I'm way back at one, starting over again. So I think at the size of the business, the order volumes they have, like the size of their labor pool, like all those things, how many SKUs they have, how big their DC is, all contribute to what's most critical at that moment.
Before John answers, I just want to say for everyone listening, it's such a relief in a way. You don't need to go out and get a warehouse management system if you don't need that yet. You don't need an inventory management system if you don't need that yet. But I also love how Jeremy pointed out, it's kind of a building on itself. So when you feel like you're ready to move to the next step, don't get stagnant either and think, well, I've got these things, I'm fine. There are ways to continue to scale through efficiency using technology, but you don't have to do it all at once. And that just feels like a relief to me. John, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are Jeremy had the perfect answer, and I'll give the dumbed down version.
Great.
If you only know 3 things, those 3 things needs to be: what do I have? How am I getting it out the door? And how am I doing? Those are the 3 key essential things that any shipper needs to know. How they get to those points is up to them. And like Jeremy mentioned, needs are going to change rapidly It's different from one business to another. Even if they look on the surface like they're doing the exact same thing, those needs will change. But you have to have a handle on what inventory do I have? How am I getting it to my customers? And how am I performing? And if you're missing any one of those three, you are going to have some late nights with heartburn. That's all there is to it.
Okay, I'm going to throw into technology here a little bit around analytics and data, because kind of a long part and parcel with using tech is the fact that suddenly you're getting all this data on what's coming in. That can be overwhelming. It's easy to feel like you have so much data in a way that you just kind of freeze up and get analysis paralysis or data fatigue or whatever it is. When it comes to looking at data, do you have any tips? Depending, again, it's going to depend on stage and whatnot of where you are, but tips for managing analytics or best practices, guidelines, anything along that way. John?
Yeah, I think that in this industry in general, there is a massive amount of data, right? Everything is codified, everything is tracked, everything has an identifier. And if you are just starting out, I agree, Lori, it can be incredibly overwhelming to know, well, which parts of these are important because I can't focus on all of it all the time. There's just too much of it. And I think that I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the reason Jeremy is in the position that he's in is because he looked at the data and he understood, and the way that he has built out the successful company that he has is by understanding the nuances of some of those needs. Easypost is the exact same way, right? Like, these companies exist and we continue to thrive and we continue to grow because every single industry is different. Every single shipper is different, but there are a lot of assumptions that can be made just based off of knowing the market, knowing the space, knowing what to look for, knowing pain points. Jeremy brought up several times SLAs. That's because in the warehouse world, you live and die by SLAs and how good you are at keeping that. On the Easypost side, we live and die by carrier selection and rate, right? Like, that is where you are going to either have a cost center or a revenue generator. And you have to really understand how specific carriers and service levels are performing. So what I would say is, if you don't know, ask. There are people that are here that can help, that want to see you succeed. The one thing that's really, really cool about the logistics industry is we all want everyone to grow, because it's the whole rising tide raises all ships concept, where we want to see the people who are in their garage move into a warehouse and then move into multiple warehouses and then have a global operation, because that means that we're all succeeding and we're looking at the right data. We understand what it says and we understand how to adjust our business practices based off what it's telling us.
Fantastic. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on data and analytics? And I actually have a question specifically for you. Going to put you on the spot. We talk SLAs. Do you have a bench line of what is, so if somebody out there is saying, well, what percentage should I be meeting my SLAs? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. So this is a topic I could geek out on for a while. So you may have to cut me off. Let me see if I can address everything you've asked and what John said, your questions here. I wrote a book, and you may have seen it. It has a purple dinosaur on the front. You may have seen it recently. Anyways, in the back of the book, there's an appendix, and it has suggested data, suggested metrics that companies should be measuring, and it talks through that at length and helps companies really understand how to put those things in place. I always suggest starting with one, because there's so much, and it's just not worth getting into so much, because you can accomplish so much with just one. And like, an easy one to think about is throughput. How many orders am I getting out per day, per shift, per person, right? People are expensive and they're insanely difficult to find, right? Do I even measure the efficiency of each of these people? And if I just focused on that, or let's say I was focusing on my average order cost, and my goal was to get it down to the penny, to know what my average order cost was and to know what the contributing factors to that cost were, I would see enormous benefit in my operation if I just focused on that. And if I did both, even more. But where the rubber meets the road here, going back to my example of the business stage, right? Let's say we picked a partner at this business stage when we were younger, that all this, as John was saying, there's data everywhere. But in all of these software products that you could buy, it doesn't necessarily exist in an accessible way.
Yes.
So then you have to go buy other products. I talked to a customer a little bit ago that's using a competing warehouse management system to ours. And this WMS has no data or reporting capabilities whatsoever. Zero, right? This is a modern product. It's
A
ish
good flag
modern.
here, Jeremy.
It's still being sold today actively. Tons and tons of people are buying it. Zero data and reporting. Okay. So what do they have to do? They have to go out and they have to buy a BI software. They are also buying an ERP data warehouse software, and they have a full-time data person on staff because now they have multiple pieces of software. I mean, the costs are out of this world. When if they had made a decision with the long term in mind, right, with the end in mind, I'm not saying they buy all the stuff that at the beginning, right? But if they had bought a system that had more robust data capabilities, even if they didn't buy them out of the gate, as their business had grown, they could say, okay, now's the time, right? And now it's integrated into a system they're already using. That system is inherently more scalable. Now, okay, I want to get serious about starting to track this stuff. I'm out of my garage, into my first warehouse, but I have a WMS in place. I know what's going on with my inventories and my orders. I want to start getting better. I can do it. I don't have to go back to square one. Right. And so I think a lot of this comes down to when we're making the decisions about the systems we're going to use to build our business, to make those decisions with the end in mind, and then to buy and spend the amount that's appropriate for where I'm at today. And those don't always overlap, right? One reason that I can geek out on this is ShipHawk occupies a unique space in the market. We are not built for micro businesses, right? My garage example. That is not a good customer for ShipHawk. Those customers should be on micro business solutions. There's a point where that's not going to work anymore because you can't push buttons. What we do is very different. It's software automation. It picks up when you're hitting, 3, 4, 5,000 orders a month on the parcel side, 300, 400 orders a month on the LTL side, and it carries them through, right? And so if you know and you think about the market that way, it looks a lot less crowded, and you're like, oh, all these guys play over here. All these giants play over here. These guys play in the middle. Where do I sit? Where's my business today? Then I can lay out a nice roadmap of the products I'm going to need to navigate the next 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then when these trends that you're talking about come into place and buyer expectations change, I have the controls to meet them without spending a bunch of money.
Okay, so I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around all of this. First of all, there's a huge gem there that I want to make sure everyone didn't miss because Jeremy said a bunch of cool things, but start with one. I love that absolute point. You can make a huge difference by focusing on one data analytic point and improving it and then moving from there. But this other piece I felt a little confused, Jeremy. So we should start, don't obviously get software that's not what you need. If you're a micro business, don't have some giant system. But on the flip side, you mentioned that we need to be ready so that we can kind of grow into it. I guess, how do we grow into something while not having a system we don't need yet? Do you understand my question?
I do. And to be honest with you, I wish I had a whiteboard here because I'd love to draw it, but we don't. So I will explain.
Well, we need to have a whole webinar on this topic, apparently.
Most of the modern products, most of the things built in the last, 10-ish years, have tiers. They're all in the cloud and they have controls for turning features on and off. You're not buying something that is more than what you need necessarily, right? If you go all the way up to the top of the market, right, you look at the Manhattans, things like that, and you're basically paying for custom dev at the end of the day on top of a baseline platform. And if you go to the bottom of the market, the ShipX products, those are really in a box, lots of buttons, ready to go. You can do everything you need, right? But it has a short shelf life. So what you do is you slot that product in the right stage, and then the scaling product comes later on. So that product's going to need to be replaced. You're not going to be able to use that forever, right? But once you get out of that stage, the products that you can buy, if you're buying modern products, they should scale with your business.
Yeah.
And you're not going to spend a fortune when you first get into that stage. You should expect to spend more over time as you leverage more of the platform, right? But you shouldn't have to continually be replatforming unless we're making bad decisions early on.
Okay, I totally get what you're saying. So like at Easypost, John, maybe this can help me understand. There's a free version when people are just printing off a few labels they can use and da-da-da, but as they grow, then it expands. John, is that what you are understanding too?
No, absolutely. And I think like it's really funny because once again, like Jeremy said, when I'm talking to someone who's shipping out of their garage, I am not spending a lot of time talking about all of the way we codify data and what that means and how to interpret it and how to analyze it and what to do with it, because that doesn't matter yet, right? They're hand keying in 10 orders a day, typing in a to address, a from address, looking at rate, buying the cheapest one, getting it out the door. That's it. But I think to Jeremy's point, I would be terrified to buy a new product if there was no way that anywhere in the future I could get access to what I'm doing and how I'm performing, right? And I think that that's key. Even if it's not something that you're worried about today, don't marry yourself to something that can't eventually provide that, or know that you will be switching to something that can, right? And I think that that's what the real key is. There is no one size fits all WMS. There's no one size fits all IMS. There's no one size fits all ERP, right? Like that's not the point of any of these products. And you have to, once again, have an open, honest conversation with yourself about where you're at, what you need, but also what will be important to you in the future. And yeah, to Jeremy's point, not to like pile on, but having a WMS that doesn't have data or analytics sends shivers up my spine, because you will reach a point where you can no longer get better because you can't analyze how you're doing. So where do you move from there?
So
the answer is you buy a better WMS.
yeah, be proactive when you are getting any tech out there is what I'm hearing. What are your hopes? What are your plans for 5 years from now? What kind of things may you need? You shouldn't be paying for them yet, as Jeremy said, but you should have the option, as John mentioned, to be able to scale into that. So that kind of brings me to our last point of relationships, because a lot of this can be accomplished as you're talking back and forth with different partners and creating kind of relationships throughout this industry. I have been amazed. I've been in other industries before. I'm old enough to have been around. And this is a super, super, super relationship heavy industry, which is funny because we're very techy and we're very, blue collar in a way. But relationships are very critical in this industry. I would love to hear from both of you. How do you nurture? How do you create relationships? Are there certain places you should be looking to build relationships, at different stages? Just really kind of what advice do you have when it comes to relationships? And Jeremy, I want to start with you.
Yeah, on the relationship side, from the shipper's perspective, right? Those on this call, I think about ecosystems. Right. So let's say your e-commerce is Shopify. There's a Shopify ecosystem there, right? Let's say your ERP is NetSuite or Acumatica or Dynamics. There's 3 different ecosystems. Understanding the relationships and players and age of those players in each of those ecosystems, what they do well, what they don't, because in the reality is, and John, I think, pointed this out, and this wasn't one of your questions, but it's a place a lot of shippers get misled and they go the wrong way. There is no one size fits all. But if you go out there and you look at everyone's websites, it looks like everyone's a one size fits all, right? We had a prospect come in just this week that our team was like, there is no chance we're selling to this. It's a bad match. This is not what we do. And we went out and found the right partner, because we have an ecosystem of these partners for this prospect. Meanwhile, one of our competitors is out there telling this prospect that they can meet their needs. They can't. That is going to be a very expensive lesson that they're gonna experience. And if the shipper, as this prospect, is spending time in that ecosystem, they will understand where each company and each product really thrives. Who are they built for? This is how I talk to our team about our ICP. We were built for the companies leaving the micro and the low end of the SMB market, coming into the mid to the high SMBs and scaling into the mid market and beyond, right? That transition is really where we want to pick up. Now, does that mean we handle everyone there? No, we don't do manufacturing execution. So if you need a robust, process internally for your actual manufacturing, we either need a partner for that, or we're just not the right, company. But everyone's not, back to John's earlier point, transparent around where they're really strong and what they were built to do. Right. So I think from a partnership and relationship perspective, the most important things for these shippers is, if you're going to pick an ecosystem, right? I had a text message this morning from a guy that's moving from no-name ERP to Shopify, and he's having these big data issues, right? And he's frustrated. He'll get through them. He's committed. He's in Shopify. Go spend time there. I don't care what happens. Like, you're not going to just bail and go somewhere else. Like, don't let anything get in the way. Understand who plays there, because that's going to help you in the future lay out that roadmap I was talking about, and do it in a way that's intelligent, is going to set you up for success in the long term.
Absolutely. John, I guess I'm going to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm saying I'm going to ask you specifically, how do you develop a relationship? So, as Jeremy mentioned, you have to find the right people and the right ecosystem. How do you then create a relationship that's beneficial for both of you?
This is going to sound like a really elementary school answer, but it's communication, right? Like, you need partners that you can communicate freely and openly with, and it has to be two-way communication, right? Like, everything that Jeremy said was just so valuable, because there is such power in knowing what you have, what your key stakeholders are, the types of customers you want and you can service really well, and knowing the ones that aren't that, right? The ones that you can't fulfill their needs, and not trying to reinvent the mold, reinvent the wheel every time someone knocks on your door, because eventually you are going to have an ultimate crisis of personality and it will break down, right? Yeah. You cannot sustain that type of business forever. So I think it's finding someone that you can talk to, that you can be open with about your needs, and someone that will answer you honestly, that will say, yeah, we're really, really good at X, Y, and Z, but A, B, and C, we don't do. So it might not be a good fit. It might not be, exactly what you need. But once again, another thing that Jeremy said that was really, really intelligent is ecosystems can go a long way, because then instead of just getting a, nope, we can't help you, you might get a, oh, we can do 90% of it. And there's this other group that we work with that can do the other 10%. And we work really, really well with them. This is going to sound like a weird comment, but I love being an uncle because I can hang out with my nieces and nephews. But when I get sick of them, I can hand them back to their parents and walk away. Yeah. I love Jeremy's industry. The WMS world is fascinating to me, and I could spend all day sitting with him and learning about it. But at the end of the day, I can wash my hands and walk away, and it's not the world that I operate in, right? Yeah. I don't have to answer those questions. I don't have to solve those problems. And it's really good to have someone like Jeremy who can solve them. And when I have a question, or when I am posed a quandary that I don't have the answer to, having people that I know I can go to who can answer them, and intelligently. They're not going to blow smoke. I'm going to know exactly what I need to say and how I need to operate.
And I'm going to say too, as for those of you who have, been on my podcast or participate in any of the webinars, I deal a lot with partners all the time. And so for some of my advice are, look for the red flags. Jeremy and John both mentioned, if people are promising they can do everything, that's probably a red flag that they can't. But also, you're going to, kind of like the dating world, you're going to kiss some frogs. I love when I do things with ShipHawk. They are a fantastic partner and a relationship for me. We both hold up our own. And so we work together well. There are definitely partners that I've gone out and tried to partner and do things with where I feel like I'm carrying everything and they're not doing much and not participating and not being a part. So you're going to have to date some frogs out there, play, see what comes up. But we're going to end this here because I do want to leave just a couple of minutes here for Q&A. If anyone has Q&A, please hop in the Q&A. I have a couple of questions I've seen already I want to make sure we get to. And again, if we don't have time to answer as we're coming up on the hour, we will make sure to reach out to you. But this has been an amazing discussion. Thank you so much to both Jeremy and John. really, really, really bright guys here. So if you have questions for them, throw them at me right now. I'm going to start with, I have a question where somebody said they're curious when we were talking about customer expectations about returns. And I know we're not returns necessarily gurus, but they said it's getting really expensive to cover free returns. Are we seeing any shifts when it comes to returns and the customer expectation as those costs have gotten really high? Either of you have an answer for me? Want to jump on that?
Yeah, something Jeremy said earlier that was really, really interesting is you can kind of look at the market and you can look at new companies that are popping up. There have been more new returns companies pop up in the last 5 years than almost anything else in the logistics industry. And it's because for so many years, returns was kind of the dirty secret that you swept under the rug. Nobody likes returns, right? It means the customer wasn't pleased. It doesn't fit their need. It's not the color they expected, right? Just the idea of a return is something went wrong. So a lot of times people are like, I don't want to think about that, right? I want to focus on the people I'm making happy, what we're doing right, because that's what makes me happy at the end of the day. There has been a shift, and I think that the world is starting to not see returns as an inherently negative thing, and instead it is just part of this ecosystem. It is part of what all of us do all the time. You are never going to run a business and ship products and not have returns. So let's approach it healthily. Let's think about the reasons we're getting returns. Maybe we need to adjust product descriptions. One of the very, very early examples I saw that really, really impressed me was a shoe company that I'm sure we've all heard of, Zappos. Zappos was one of the first companies that I ever saw that had all sorts of really cool features in the checkout space. Things like, hey, does this fit tight? Does it fit loose? Or does it fit just right? Hey, is the color what I thought it was? Or is it maybe a little bit wrong? And as I was thinking through, how are they building the data to give me this upfront information as a consumer? They're doing it based off returns. Every time someone returned something, they were asking them, why are you returning it? What's wrong with it? Was it too tight? Was the size wrong? Everything else. And it allowed them to make intelligent decisions. And now you see that type of technology really spreading throughout the entire e-commerce world, where everyone wants to give you upfront, this is exactly what it is. This is what it looks like. This is how big it is. This is kind of the reviews that we've got, everything like that. So I think returns is going to continue growing and becoming important because we're no longer ignoring it. We're no longer pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And Joe, who asked that question, returns is a huge topic. That we can have full webinars on that. So if that's something you're interested in the survey after, let us know. But Jeremy, I have one other question for you before we end. It's about tech. How can I keep my teams up to date or upskilled even on technology? Do you have any tips for staying up to date with the latest tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to two things we talked about. One is the ecosystem, right? Like, take part in it. You know, we go to our ERP trade shows. Like, I would be sending teams there. I'd be working with my ERP sales rep to get discounts or free tickets whenever possible so I could send more people. Just keep them involved. And if I send someone, make it a requirement for them to come back and educate everyone to pass on that information so everybody stays in the loop. A lot of them are now doing virtual also, so people back at the office can watch the most important seminars or meetups. The other thing is, this goes back to who you're picking as your tech partner, because when you pick the tech partner, they should also be helping you train your team.
Great
And
point.
if you're picking the right tech partner, they're going to help you train your team, connect with other partners that can solve your other problems, who will also help train your team, right? If you're using some of these legacy products, they just don't have the infrastructure built that way because that wasn't the demand at the time. It was the world operated very differently, right? As I'll give you an hour, you give me $300 or whatever the number is, right? And it's just different today.
Yeah.
And so I would think about, once again, that roadmap from a more all-encompassing perspective, and training and the ongoing needs of training of the team would be a component of that. And I'd be asking about it on all these calls.
Absolutely. It goes back to that partnership. So those were fantastic answers. Thank you again. We're hitting the top of the hour. I want to honor your time. So I just really appreciate all of the insights. Any other questions that got asked, we'll make sure to follow up. But Please remember, we'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any thoughts or questions, you'll see a survey after. And again, you will get this recording in 24 hours. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, John. You have really had some insightful thoughts today. And thank you to everyone who was here. Really appreciated having you on. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jeremy.